Well, joining me to discuss this is Lehrich, co-founder and senior advisor at Accountable Tech and former foreign policy spokesman for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. Jesse, thank you so much for joining. So first, could you just lay out for us exactly how Facebook has been mishandling all of this data?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I think this is a consistent issue we've seen with Meta over the last decade plus, where their business model is premised on collecting enormous amounts of personal data and weaponizing it through surveillance advertising for colossal profits. And so time and time again, they've been, whether it's EU regulators or regulators in the US, they've been held accountable for misusing and mishandling that data. And time again, they've kind of shrugged their shoulders, paid these fines to the extent that they have to, and continued business as usual.
So you're saying that they're shrugging their shoulders and that this is, Meta's business premise essentially, but they are saying that thousands of other companies are doing this. Are they not just being singled out?
I think they're being singled out for a good reason. I think they have consistently been one of the worst violators of privacy laws. I think it's true that that could have sweeping implications, and there's, the U.S. and EU have been working on a new transatlantic data privacy framework that may address some of the underlying issues. But I think when it comes to Meta, you heard how defiant Nick Clegg's response was, and that's sort of been their MO over the last decade as they've gotten in trouble time and time again for, showing complete disregard for their legal and societal obligations.
Right, and Meta is facing some consequences here, but at the crux of it, isn't it also that the EU does not trust the United States with their citizens' own data? What is it about the US system that they think is so weak?
I think there are a number of things, but, for starters, we don't even have a federal privacy law. Congress has failed to even enact basic federal privacy data protection standards that most of the rest of the modern world has in place. And so I think, this ruling and this situation, again, underscores just how severely Congress has failed and for how long to hold tech accountable and provide basic digital rights for American citizens.
Right, and so the EU has taken action here with this record fine, but when you look at Meta's profits in the first quarter of this year, it was $5.7 billion. I mean, that's a huge amount of money, especially when you're looking at how much they've been fined this time. Is it just a slap on the wrist for them?
I think it's encouraging that the EU has ratcheted up its enforcement of GDPR, their privacy law, and its efforts to hold big tech accountable more broadly. But I think that you're exactly right, that the incentive structure continues to be broken. And these companies, Meta in particular, but you've seen it with other big companies like Apple and Google, where they'd rather just continue to pay these slap on the wrist fines and continue business as usual, because you're being fined $1 billion and turning $100 billion in revenue each year. Why would you stop your profitable, extraction and monetization of data? You wouldn't. And I think,
right.
It just underscores that we need real, structural tools to change the incentive, or else these companies are just going to continue this bad behavior.
So when we're talking about structural tools, looking at another situation here, you may have seen that TikTok is now suing Montana because the state is going to ban the app starting early next year. That bill is going to take a bit of time to be implemented. Do you think individual states should be taking sweeping actions like that?
I think in this case in particular, I think it's pretty clear that what Montana has done is unconstitutional. I think, I think it's very understandable that states are continuing to take action on their own accord, because the Congress and federal government in the U.S. have failed to do anything to hold tech accountable, even as they have continued to amplify their rhetoric about how outrageous big tech's behavior has been. But I think, it just underscores, again, the need for some sort of actual federal action here. And I think on TikTok in particular, there are unique threats that are posed by its Chinese ownership. And those are real threats. And so are their, sort of surveillance practices that they engage in and the impact that they have on young people in particular,
Right.
but the public good writ large. And so those are real things that need to be addressed, but I think they need to be addressed constitutionally
Right.
and by our federal lawmakers.
Yes, Jesse, thank you so much. It's clear that lawmakers in several countries are trying to grapple with how to respond. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.